Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. Why don't each of you just introduce yourselves and your institutions and our virtual attendees as well, please?
Good morning, everyone. I'm John Blejo. I'm the Director of Industrial Research at the Central Office of CUNY.
My name is Fernando Mucio. I'm a professor at Rutgers University, and I lead the coalition that is pursuing one of the BBB grants that you've been hearing about.
I'm Deborah Novick. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Westchester County. I work with Bridget Gibbons in Economic Development, and we're also one of the BBB applicants.
And Steve?
Muted.
I think you're muted, Steve. Can we unmute him? Steve, I think you're muted.
I can hear him on my end. Can you guys hear me down there?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Once again, I'm Steve Hall. I'm the Senior Vice President for Advocacy at the American Council of Engineering Companies, the trade association of America's engineering industry.
Great. Christine?
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Feline, lead instructor of the Northeast I-4 Hub at Princeton, or based at Princeton, also COO and co-founder of Lignolix, a startup in the region.
Terrific. So this panel is designed to kind of let us know about some of the new federal initiatives that are being implemented now and that will be implemented in the future. So Steve, tell us a little bit about the two pieces of legislation that were passed by the House and Senate that might have some impact on life sciences and related tech.
Yeah, I think I'm handling the future portion of the conference. Yeah, a lot of moving pieces down here. You know, the House has passed the Science for the Future Act. This was back in June, bipartisan legislation that came out of the House Science Committee to provide policy guidance and funding authorization for DOE's Office of Science. And this is going to support research on materials, chemical science, bioscience, a whole slew of things that, quite frankly, will support much of what you all are talking about today. Much of that legislation has been folded into larger legislation, which has already passed the House. This is the Innovation and Competition Act, sponsored by the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Chuck Schumer. This is a good sponsor to have for legislation like this. As you probably know, it started as the Endless Frontiers Act and morphed into something much, much bigger. You know, I checked in with the sponsors of both pieces of legislation late yesterday to get an up-to-the-minute kind of update, and that there's an effort now. Many of you all have been hearing about this effort in Congress to pass a piece of legislation known as reconciliation, which is really going to carry the president's social policy. And Senator Schumer and his team have been able to get some advance funding for the Innovation and Competition Act embedded into that reconciliation bill. $3.5 billion for regional tech centers, tech hubs, $1.8 billion for NSF's tech directorate, and a number of other things. And so they're trying to use that reconciliation as a vehicle to jumpstart this effort. And then once that process is done, leaders in the House and the Senate are going to go back, work together, and get final passage of the authorizing legislation, the Innovation and Competition Act, once they get past these big pieces of legislation. And then, of course, the other thing that's certainly near and dear to the engineering industry's heart is the major infrastructure legislation, which has already passed the Senate and is awaiting action in the House. We could potentially see action in the House this week, today or tomorrow, on both the reconciliation bill and the infrastructure package. That's going to be a challenge, but the speaker has indicated that she could do that or possibly keep them around until into the weekend to move these pieces of legislation. So lots of moving pieces. Stay tuned. It seems to change almost every day. But I think these are going to pass, both of them. And that's certainly good news for the life sciences effort there in New York City. And then just finally, before I go to wrap up, I got to thank Mitch Simpler of JBB. He's a former chair of ACEC and really played a critical role in recruiting our organization to support this effort. So thank you, Mitch, for bringing us into this, and look forward to the rest of the program.
Wow, that's breaking news, Steve. Thank you very much for that update. I was not aware that those pieces of legislation or the elements were folded into the social policy piece that they're considering now. So that's very exciting for the area. Some of you may recall, if you participated last year, Senator Schumer opened our symposium last year with a discussion of the Endless Frontier Act, which this year morphed into the U.S. Competitiveness Act and now is part of the reconciliation package. So that's terrific. Thank you so much for that update.
My pleasure.
Christina, so one of the programs that's actually current now is the NSF iHubs Core, which has recently been expanded, and we have the leaders of two of those cores, one led by Princeton and one led by CUNY, to talk about what they're doing. And the reason this is important is because this is, you heard Sho from Connecticut talk about the investment in R&D. This is where the R&D starts, at the Academic Medical Center and with ideas coming out of there, and this is how it gets translated into the companies. So Christina, you want to talk a little bit about the work you're doing?
Sure, yeah, and we can go ahead and pull up the slides if that's, yep, there you go. So, oh, these are the old ones, that's all right. I tried to make a more simplistic version of this, but it's all the same. So the National Science Foundation, one of many federal agencies, created the Innovation Corps, or I-Corps program, about a decade ago. And John and I actually used to work together at CUNY with the, back then, and he'll talk more about this, the New York City node. Just this past summer, the NSF announced that they will be funding a new kind of center grant, which is called the I-Corps Hubs. And John and I have been lucky enough to have been selected to be funded for the launch of these hubs. So the I-Corps program overall, as I mentioned, began 10 years ago as a way to help translate the basic research that NSF and other federal agencies put into mostly academia, right? There's a lot of basic research grants given to a lot of universities across the country. And however, those the inventions and discoveries from those grants, spurring from that funding, often lived and died in the university walls. So maybe they would file IP. Most importantly, they would publish papers, because that's the goal of professors, right? Publish or perish. And there was a disconnect between that basic research, activity into then turning into viable deep tech startups. So I-Corps was started as a way to bridge that gap, or bridge the valley of death, as it's called in the venture world. And it's been really successful. There was a report that came out, it was the biennial I-Corps report that came out in June, I believe it was, talking about the numbers, some really great economic impact numbers. We've trained over 2,000, I think it's like close to 2,500 teams. John can correct me, I think he's teaching a cohort right now. And we've had some really great successes even outside of economic impact. We create innovators, not just startups. So it's been a really successful program. As I mentioned, it's a decade old. It's transitioning now into this new model from nodes into hubs. So if we can go to the next slide, which I don't know if it's going to be the right slide now. Yeah, go to the next one after this. Yeah, we're going to have to keep going. This is... think the next one. Yep. So this is our hub, the Northeast I-Core Hub. Again, we're one of 5 that were awarded. We each got $15 million from the NSF. So they put an investment of $75 million into the hubs. This round, there is a new solicitation coming out very soon. So there will be hypothetically more hubs funded in the near future. Our hub is led by Princeton University, which is where I'm based at and why I'm not there today. And we have a couple of partners, Rutgers University and University of Delaware, who are both I-Core sites, which is, I won't get into the complexity, but those are going to be archive programs now transitioning into this hub. And we have a number of affiliates, which are the white dots around the region. And we're going to be expanding. We already have 2 MOUs executed with other universities that I can't announce yet, but it will definitely increase our footprint across the Northeast. So that's the I-Core Hub program. John can talk more about the New York City-centric one, and happy to answer any questions that we have at the end of the panel. Thanks.
John, you want to say a few words about the New York Hub?
Yeah, thanks, Christina, for giving that nice introduction. If I could have my one slide up. So what I'd like to do for the audience is to explain what the world was like when Christina and I began this over 10 years ago. So when I joined the CUNY central office in 2010, there were almost no entrepreneurship centers in the country. The few that existed, there were a handful in New York City, were based in business schools. And the Valley of Death slide that Christina showed you was a recognition by the National Science Foundation that with all of the R&D money that we're putting in from the NSF and the NIH, we really need to start companies. So I-Core was an experiment to see if we could pressure test research discoveries paid for by federal dollars. And if there's a go there, then we would form a company and take off. So for the audience here, Christina and I are at the front end of the pipeline. We start at the lab notebook. We are not tech transfer. At the end of our process, if you're a go, then you disclose. That's the model. That's the space and the development pipeline that we're at. And the picture on the left there shows the map of our first I-Core proposal. And I can tell you, when I wrote that proposal, I said our arc of life science goes from Groton, where Pfizer is, to Westchester, Pennsylvania, where Merck is. So we included 4 states, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. And Pennsylvania was mainly the Philadelphia area and the Delaware Valley, which includes the Pennsylvania Biotech Incubator, which is another successful partner of ours. During the time that we got first funded, it was Christina who actually created Engineering I-Core. And her pilot was at Cooper Union. And believe it or not, back in these days, 2013, 2014, every freshman engineering student at Cooper Union took an I-Core course. And those of you who have engineering degrees and you remember freshman year suffering through economics like I did, we've replaced that with an I-Core course. And the Cooper Union pilot scaled. So we went from Engineering I-Core, and what I'd like to say is STEM, deep tech, entrepreneurship education became cool. Today, there is not a college in the United States that does not have some engineering, an entrepreneurship program. And I would say even further, the late adopters and the laggards, which are the medical schools, every medical center now markets how they do innovation, right? So that comes to where are we today? We've been watching this trend of how entrepreneurship and innovation became cool. We saw the medical centers finally buying into this process. Simultaneously, you were building incubators, right? So the timing was right. So when we wrote the hub proposal and we were organizing our partners back in 2019, early 2020, we were very farsighted. We decided to go all in life science in New York City. That's what our hub is going to be like. And the map on the right are all of our partners. And those are the schools in the New York City region that are involved in our hub. So for example, we're partnering with Sinai. We're partnering with Rockefeller University. First time we've ever done a large center grant with Rockefeller University, but it's mainly the life sciences. We have Stony Brook involved. We also have UMass Medical. And the reason for that is the NIH has also been investing in translational medical research. And they created a whole institute called NCATS, National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences. Rockefeller and UMass were founding members of the NCAT Institute. So we've been teaching I-Corps to these medical centers for the last 5 years. There was a new renewal of that center grant, so now Columbia and Rochester are involved in the grant. So we're here. The pipeline is ready to go. So, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you, both John and Christina. That was a great description, but I think you can see from Christina's comments, you know, her area stretches down to Delaware and you're stretching out to Massachusetts and Pennsylvania. And so that region is, the region is very large, and it's also quite concentrated in terms of proximity, the location proximities when you're thinking about other clusters in the world, which I think will be a good thing. So on to the next. Another federal program that is going on right now is the Build Back Better Challenge from the Department of Commerce, EDA, and we have 2 representatives who have just submitted grant applications for planning for that. But this program offers 20 or 30 communities that are selected up to $100 million to build new infrastructure. So, Fernando, do you want to?
Yeah, let me tell you what we're trying to do, but I want to give a little bit of background where we come from and why we're doing this. So there's been growing interest in advanced pharmaceutical manufacturing. It's something the FDA has been a strong proponent for quite a few years, actually. But because of COVID, the awareness in political circles that the pharmaceutical supply chain is heavily brittle has become very urgent. I mean, right now we're importing in the order of 80% of all the pharmaceutical products we use in this country, which during COVID resulted in a lot of shortages and an awareness that should an interruption of international commerce happen for a prolonged period, that could cause enormous hardship. So between 2006 and 2016, I had the privilege to direct an NSF engineering research center that focused entirely on pharma. We have 40 member companies. We had the FDA on board. And we spent about $100 million creating what later on became the first established advanced manufacturing methodology in the pharma space. It's a technique called continuous direct compression, which recently FDA has declared is no longer an emerging technology, it's now a mature technology. It's the one and only example we have of a mature advanced manufacturing methodology. There are many that are in the process. So what we learned in doing all of that is that while brand-based pharma is able to do advanced manufacturing, and in fact all the approvals from FDA, and there are a number of them now, are with branded pharma, smaller or generic companies haven't entered the space. The reasons are several. One is it takes 4 to 5 years to get a facility up and running and to get an approval from FDA. You need to spend $20 to $30 million up front, and then it's several years before you get any return on investment. Access to know-how and access to trained personnel are significant roadblocks. So we figured that we would propose to create what we call an advanced manufacturing corridor. It's really focused on technology transfer and workforce development, as well as entrepreneurship. The idea is, let's have all of the technology components and know-how available so that companies can come, we can develop their process, we can support their filing with regulatory agencies. Doing that, we cut the time they have to wait to get an approval from about 5 years to maybe 2 years. And we greatly reduce the upfront investment because then they can transfer the technology to a contract manufacturer, or maybe they're building along, in parallel, but it greatly compresses the time they have to wait for return on investment, and their people can get trained in the facility while the process is being developed. So the overall plan is to invest $100 million in several projects that synergize each other, focused on building the facilities to do this tech transfer, train personnel and promote a whole host of entrepreneurship activities. So we hope to get a positive result from the Economic Development Administration.
Well, good luck with that. What are the schools that are involved with
So Rutgers is leading, Princeton is participating, Middlesex College is participating, and also NJIT, the New Jersey Institute of Technology. In addition, we have several state government entities, the New Jersey EDA and the New Jersey Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology have joined the partnership. And then we have every major trade organization in the space in New Jersey also as a coalition partner. We have NJ Bio, we have NJ MEP, Choose New Jersey, Hinge, the Healthcare Institute of New Jersey, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody and I'm going to get in trouble, but the
idea is it's a consortium of companies
it's
and
a coalition,
universities.
yeah.
Yes.
No private companies at this point. We will be engaging companies very soon, but one of the rules under BBB is that for-profit entities cannot be coalition participants. They can be partners, but or supporters, but not immediate recipients of federal funding.
Right. So this is the possibility of $100 million in new infrastructure for biomanufacturing and workforce development. So that's exciting. So tell us about, Deborah, tell us about what you applied for.
Sure, I will. I was, just to add a little color, we heard recently that over 500 regions in the country applied for these. And so yeah. I think there will be 50 or 60 phase 1 grants and 20 or 30 phase 2 grants, which is not even one per state, and it's probably not even one per supercluster, but hopefully we'll get something, or one of us will. But Westchester County applied for one of these Build Back Better grants to deepen our life sciences ecosystem cluster. And I wish I could have heard everything that Bridget said, because I don't want to repeat everything that she said. But at the beginning of 2021, we formed a biosciences industry task force, and we've been working with stakeholders from all around our county to understand the needs of the cluster. And so because we've invested this 10 months of work with all these stakeholders, we felt like we really understood what would be needed to advance the cluster, and we were well positioned, maybe not with 10 years of advanced manufacturing planning, but at least 10 months of deepening our understanding of what was happening in the cluster. And so what we know is needed is in 4 project areas. One is real estate, and of course, that's a big theme of this conference and of this organization. We have a small biosciences incubator at New York Medical College, which has about 10 startups in it, and we know there are a lot of other startups around Westchester that are working in individual buildings here and there, or in people's garages, or virtually. And there's the example of Regeneron at the far other end of the spectrum, controlling close to 1 million square feet of life sciences real estate. There are several other buildings, but we know that there's a gap in the market for flexible graduation space, second stage space. So one big area of need is real estate related. We need more lab and office space that can be flexible. So that's one important thing that we would love to tackle if we're awarded this grant. The next thing is the talent pipeline. We have excellent academic institutions around the county that are producing a lot of STEM graduates. There are some specialty programs like a master's in pharmaceutical manufacturing. What we don't have locally is an engineering program. Now, clearly there are fine engineering programs nearby. There's Manhattan College in the Bronx. There's Cornell Tech in New York City, and I'm sure there are many others that I could point to. But we would like to have an engineering program right within the county, and we have recently signed an MOU with a college to bring that program to Westchester. I'm hedging because I'm not certain if I'm supposed to announce it or not. So talent pipeline is the second thing. I'm sure Bridget mentioned that Regeneron's expansion will add over 1,000 jobs to the county, and we need to make sure that we're aligning the academic programs and workforce training programs that are available in the county with the job needs that not only Regeneron, but all the other players in the industry see coming down the pike, so that there will be a good match there. I know the focus of this is regional, and of course, talent is regional. I'm sure many people in this room have lived and worked in many of the communities that are part of this growing region, including going out to Philadelphia and in other directions. The I-95 or the Amtrak Washington-Boston corridor, I think, is very well traveled for commuting and people changing locations frequently. So there's density of talent, I think, here, but we want to be sure that in Westchester, we're making it possible for young people to get their education and then stay, have the right skills to find a job locally. The third need is around access to investment capital. We're a county, not a state, so we don't have much control over incentives in the way a state does. But we are looking into what incentives it is possible for us to make available within our county and work hard on deepening sources of private investment capital to our ecosystem. And the fourth thing is the supply chain, similar to what Fernando was saying. We've all recognized that the supply chain is not only critical for resilience, but also provides a real opportunity because, in Westchester, we do have more space maybe than some parts of New York City. Land is a little bit less costly, building is a little bit less costly, and so there is an opportunity, we hope, to attract some businesses or establish some businesses that can strengthen the local supply chain. So those are the big themes. There are some specialty expansion possibilities that we would love to pursue if we get this grant, and one of them is the Center for Disaster Medicine, which is also based at New York Medical College. Has a lot to do with pandemic response and resilience to other kinds of emergencies. That center is training emergency responders for the last several years, but mostly within the New York area, and we think there's an opportunity to expand the services that center provides to become a national center, in which case emergency responders would be coming from all over the country for that disaster training. So that's one specific project. And I'm sure many of you have heard about the North 60, which is a real estate campus devoted to the life sciences that is on the drawing board and hopefully will be moving forward very soon. So those are some of the things that are more specific that we mentioned in the application, and fingers crossed, that will be one of the lucky regions that's chosen.
Yeah, I've been following Westchester's development for 20 years now, so it would really be nice to see you get some money to actually start to move forward on projects like the North 60.
It would be.
Yeah, would be terrific. But I think you can see from this discussion how regional the federal investments are, whether they're at the early stages of discovery or whether they are, building infrastructure for advanced manufacturing. So it really spans the entire continuum, but it is a regional focus. And as Steve said, there could be some really exciting news soon, which is something that I didn't know. So I learned something this morning also. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you for including us.
Thanks for having us, Nancy.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Great, so now we're going to drill down a little bit into some state and federal initiatives, and there's a lot of really exciting things to talk about because all of the states are doing amazing things in terms of making new investments in this area. Loretta, do you want to, well, first let's introduce ourselves and then you can get us started.
So I'm Loretta Bine. I work for Empire State Development, which is New York State's economic development agency. And what we do is we help businesses that are looking to grow. If somebody wants to move to New York State, we might incentivize their move here by paying for jobs.
Thank you very much. Brian Sabina, I'm the Chief Economic Growth Officer for the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. We are the principal agency for economic development and community development in the state of New Jersey.
Matt McCooey, I'm with Kinetic Innovations. We're the state of Connecticut's venture capital arm. We also run a innovation ecosystem building organization called CT Next. Thanks so much for being here. It's been fun.
And I'm Monica Maloney with the New York City Economic Development Corporation. I'm on our life sciences and healthcare team, so you heard from Sue Rosenthal, who leads that team earlier. And we are the city's economic development agency.
Terrific. So Loretta, tell us all about the exciting things going on at the state level.
Well, there's a lot, and I think we heard some things this morning. Everybody was talking about the tremendous growth at Regeneron. Initially, what I do every day is I help companies, like I mentioned in my intro, that are looking for New York State assistance, or we can connect people to local government or utilities to help reduce the cost of doing business. So a lot of you guys out there do something completely different than what I do. So economic development is the arm from New York State that helps incentivize businesses to grow here and to make investments, create jobs. And what I do for the state is work in the life sciences. That's why I'm sitting up here today, to make sure that you guys know that we have programs specifically for your industry. We work with other partners. We're talking to real estate all the time. We're talking to universities, SUNY and CUNY, and private universities, and figuring out what we can do to sort of make the environment better for you to grow your business here. We heard a lot about Regeneron, so they're creating 1,000 jobs in the Mid-Hudson. That's a unique story that doesn't happen every day. So every time, say, Regeneron comes to us to tell us about an expansion they might be planning, we will come to the table and talk to them about what incentives might be available or how we can help them to do business and jump over all the hurdles it takes to move forward in an expansion with planning and everything else you need to do. But we're also talking to early stage companies. One of the things that New York State did a couple of years ago with its new life sciences money was to fund a J-Labs in New York City. And there are plenty of incubators, but this one in particular came with a lot of programming. So to be able to hear from Johnson & Johnson executives and to be led through what it's like to really start a business and not just be a scientist, but work with entrepreneurs. So we're looking at all levels and stages of the business and trying to find out ways that we could help you grow here and help you see New York State's assets.
Yeah, and the state put money into SOSV and IndieBio also, right?
Yes, so that's a recent investment, and I think they graduated the second class just now. And for an example, one of the things that I'm doing for those classes, for those cohorts, is just to have a session with them on the phones. In the world of Zoom, we all sit in our kitchens and we talk about what they might be doing for next steps and how the state and local government can help them, and why they should stay in New York. Pressure. As opposed to move somewhere else. I mean, I feel like that's a lot of times when a company moves, it's because their investor is somewhere else. But when you're starting and growing in New York, there's the infrastructure is there, not just transportation, but the universities, the labs and other things to do clinical trial, everything you could think of. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why SOSV and J-Labs and other incubators are able to make hay here, because there's a strong infrastructure.
Yeah, and SOSV IndieBio is actually one of the success stories. They piloted it at Rockefeller University starting 2 years ago, and now they just signed a lease at 7 Penn Plaza for about 27,000 square feet that they're building out right now. So.
Exactly.
And if imitation is the finest form of flattery, we just did the same thing
You
in
did.
a different sector
Yeah.
with SOSV in Newark. So it's a great model.
The hacks.
Absolutely.
Yep. So Brian, tell us about New Jersey. I mean, $11.5 billion, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a big job to kind of handle all that too. Well, thank you so much, Nancy and Mitch, for having us. And thank you to Carolyn, right, who kicked us off this morning. I'm an economic development professional who happens to be in New Jersey, but I think about myself as an economic development professional, and regional thinking is the way to go. I think it is the way forward. So very much appreciate NYC Builds Bio embracing that this year. One of the things that we think about in New Jersey, you heard from Sanjivani, you heard from Kathy, you heard from Fernando, you heard from Christina telling New Jersey's story. I'll try to add to that. We have 18 million square feet of life sciences space in our state right now that's available. And one of the things that's really exciting about that is kind of building on that planning theme. Jane Jacobs said, new ideas need old or older spaces. And we're seeing that with what's happening in the life science sector in New Jersey. You mentioned that. We're thrilled to see that incredible growth of companies here in New York City, because they're going to need a chance to scale. They're going to need a chance to grow. They're going to need a chance to expand. And we think that we fill, at least historically, an incredibly strong part of the value proposition. And when we look at some of our historic campuses, right, whether it's On3, which is a former Roche site, or the Center of Excellence, which is a former Sanofi site, we're seeing those large facilities being broken down into smaller condoed units. And that really has allowed us to, one, diversify, and two, increase the energy in that ecosystem. So we're quite excited about that part of the economy. And add to that the spaces we're seeing in the Gateway region, whether it's the Cove or 95 Green Street, or the hub that's being built in New Brunswick, a brand new project that we talked about earlier. There's new dynamic spaces for companies to kind of take that first step across the Hudson into New Jersey, and then further expand into the broader state. In terms of what are we doing to support that, you mentioned $11.5 billion worth of incentive programs through the 2020 ERA Economic Recovery Act. We're in the midst of putting that together, but really I would say that's kind of the capstone. We've been working for 4+ years under Governor Murphy's leadership to build an incredibly comprehensive set of supports. It starts with seed grants and rent support through our program called NJ Ignite that gives early stage startups free rent at incubators and at co-working spaces, through programs to support accelerators like HACS that you talked about, to an expanded angel investor tax credit, an expanded net operating loss program. All of these programs allow companies to get funding as they grow. And with that, they become stronger tenants for the real estate community, and they become more able to invest in their business and their people. So we think that's really strong. We've added to that the Emerge program, which is a jobs-based incentive program. It's a successor to Grow New Jersey, between $500 and $8,000 per job, as well as an Aspire program, which is our gap-based real estate financing program that can fund up to 50% of your capital needs if there's a gap in your financing stack. And part of that is a transformative aspect, which is like if you are a developer who is thinking about a major campus, and really thinking about trying to do something maybe on par with what the Cove is doing, come to us. If you're spending more than $100 million, we can work with you to really think about how we can partner. We can give tax credits up to $250 million to support those projects. So we have a suite of tools to help you. I think the final message I would say is just come and talk to us. We want to grow with you. We want to grow with you, whether you're a company, whether you're a developer, and whether you're a partner up here on the stage with us.
Terrific, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
Yeah, so Kinetic Innovations, we're the state of Connecticut's venture capital firm, like I said. What does that mean? We act like any other venture capital firm. We do early stage investing, even pre-seed, all the way up through mezzanine debt, biofacilities debt. We've about $500 million under management. It grew $100 million this year with all of the exits we've had, which has been amazing. Rally Bio and Arvinas and Biohaven. There's a bunch of great life sciences companies in Connecticut that have gone like that. And so we sort of have stayed in those stocks and have been able to ride that wave. So it's been an extraordinary year for venture capital in general for everybody. Connecticut's been no exception. Just a couple of other things I want to add to what Sho said. Nancy, you're involved with Jackson Labs and the Precision Medicine Lab. You saw what Connecticut built up there. That was a big effort. by the prior governor Malloy to bring precision medicine, to add another research lab. Big bet, no idea if it was going to work out or not. Charles Lee came in and led it, did a fantastic job, I think, and went from $0 to $50 million in research funding in 4 or 5 years. That inured to the benefit, I think, of UConn, which has doubled its research funding in the last 4 years, which is amazing, I think, that, you know, a public institution can grow like that. Obviously, Yale's doing what Yale does. So I think Connecticut has, maybe for the first time, a research base that we can build upon and that venture capitalists can look at and entrepreneurs can look at, and there's enough companies. It used to be a lot like New York City in 2010. Somebody was saying that there just weren't enough companies to go to. And so it was a real risk for somebody to leave Cambridge and take a job in New Haven or Stanford, because if they lose their job, where are they going to go? They're going to go back up to Cambridge. And so nobody wants to leave their families if there's not a sort of a significant base of companies where they can go from one place to the next. And we finally have that cross-pollination. And I want to echo what you said before about the regionalism versus the competition. I've long had a big issue with, you know, what GE and Massachusetts, I love Massachusetts as well, what Massachusetts spent and the taxpayers spent to bring GE and how little the taxpayers got for it, what Wisconsin spent to bring Foxconn. I think the notion of states competing against each other is antiquated. I think it's a bad use of taxpayer funds. I think it's bad for everybody involved. And I love what I'm hearing about today. You know, build great facilities, build great, you know, have it work with the developers, give proper incentives. Like, those are the ways I think that are going to make this region stronger. It's not by, you know, giving away dollars to people who come. So we also have a fund of funds program. We're trying to set up a new life sciences fund at 101 College, which is a new building that's being built by Win Stanley Partners. It's about 550,000 square feet. Biolabs is going to be in there. We'd love to have a new venture firm. So if you know anybody who wants to have some big LPs, but we've got a lot of money, we're out there actually seeking to incubate a first-time life sciences fund. Because the truth of the matter is we have Canaan Partners and Oak, but you know, it is an issue when all the money is in New York, Boston, or Silicon Valley. And so we're trying to build up that the life science venture capital ecosystem as well. But thanks again. It's been super interesting.
Yeah, you know, that's important because unbeknownst to a lot of people, venture capitalists don't really like to travel a lot. So they want their companies close by, right? Yeah. And that's why you really need that kind of funding source available near where the research universities are.
Exactly.
So, great. So Monica, tell us about the recent announcements by the EDC.
Sure. So I think we heard a little bit this morning about the doubling of the city's investment in life sciences to $1 billion. And what I'm going to talk about a little bit is just sort of how this is dovetailing as well with New York City's focus on long-term recovery and really making New York City a hub for public health as well. And we got a little bit of experience during the pandemic on this. We helped to launch the Pandemic Response Lab, also known as PEARL. That was in September 2020. That's a joint venture between Opentrons, P4 Clinical, and NYU. It processes 45,000 COVID-19 PCR tests per day, returns results in under 24 hours. It's processed 3.5 million COVID tests, and it's the lab that is used by our public hospital system, New York City Health and Hospitals, as well as other major health systems in New York City. Pearl recently moved to InnoLabs. That's a 267,000 square foot Class A life sciences facility that just opened in Long Island City, so Opentrons has expanded there. That's supported by our industrial development agency. Most of the $1 billion of the city's investment is for both that IDA tax abatement bucket as well as for city capital, which I'm going to get to recent investment there. And so around the time that we were supporting the launch of the Pearl, we also put out a request for information really to better understand how we could strengthen the city's public health infrastructure. And the result of that was the Pandemic Response Institute RFP that we put out. And we were really pleased to announce that we recently selected Columbia University with key partner CUNY to lead this Pandemic Response Institute. It's going to be supported by $20 million in city capital. It's led by two really incredible physicians and public health professionals. So Dr. Dean of the CUNY Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy. It's going to have 4 technical work streams, one of which is piloting and scaling innovations. Another is going to be establishing and strengthening systems of real-time data collection and sharing. Another around analyzing epidemiological and other data. And then the fourth and final is building workforce capacity. There's also going to be cross-cutting teams that are making sure that all of the work at the PRI is really informed by community, that we have effective communication systems. We learned how important that was during the pandemic. And that racial equity is also integrated at all levels. So I just kind of want to say another thing about equity, because that's really central to the EDC's mission. And I think there are really a couple ways that we're thinking about this. And we want to ensure that all New Yorkers are benefiting from the life sciences industry. We want to make sure they have opportunities to work in this industry. We've had a Life Sci NYC internship program since 2017. We've served over 400 student interns during that time. 40% of those interns converted to full-time jobs at the end of their internship. 75% of those students are non-white, half of them are female. So it's this just incredible, diverse pipeline of talent into companies large and small in New York City. I mean, we've had one-person startups, multinational corporations. Pfizer has taken many interns. And I know, Nancy, you mentioned that there are some startups in the audience today. So if you need an intern, please let us know. We would love to help you find one. And another thing I just want to talk about, just because it was announced yesterday, is the second annual Exceed Award that it was created by Deerfield Management in tandem with the development of the Cure, which is another project that is backed by the IDA. And this year the theme is on neurodegeneration. The prizes for that award are $100,000, and it specifically targets folks that are currently underrepresented in the life sciences, so minority and women-led startups. And then, just last thing, we're focused on strengthening neighborhoods, ensuring communities from across the city can benefit from the economic opportunities that come with these new developments. We want to see life sciences across the city. So just as one example, we recently announced a $50 million city capital award to BioBat. That's at the Brooklyn Army Terminal. On the Brooklyn waterfront. So,
yeah, that's very exciting. BioBat, the upgrade of that facility would be a huge asset for New York City.
Absolutely.
And we've actually done a lot of programming around equity in the workforce and making sure that the benefits of the good-paying jobs generated by this industry are shared by all. So I encourage you, we've got those video clips of our past programs on our website, and I encourage you to listen to them because there's some really interesting, exciting things going on in the city around that. So thanks, everybody.
Nancy, I was going to say, from that theme of building equity and from the beginning is across everything we're doing now, but as you look forward at kind of the macro trend, it is going to be baked into every source of federal funding, every source of state funding. So we 100% are looking for partners who are built environments, who are building workforce programs, who are building that into everything they're doing as not an afterthought, not as an add-on, but core to the value proposition that a project brings. So 100% echo what Monica and I'm sure all of my colleagues would say here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just make one comment? We were talking about economic development and how maybe industry does not see the boundaries. They see a region. And then when you can evaluate a region by its assets, meaning the Northeast, or maybe we're competing with overseas or California. I just wanted to, maybe Brian will say so too, but we have some economic development programs that are friendly to the taxpayer and also useful to the company. So what we're trying to do is incentivize a project with enough money to make the company do the project here and now without interfering in what the taxpayer thinks about what we might be doing. So the economic impact and the fiscal benefit to the New York State economy would break, better. So if somebody's coming here creating jobs, there's going to be an influx of money. They're going to buy more Starbucks here and everything else. So it's not just that we're giving away taxpayers' money, we're incentivizing a project to increase the fiscal benefit to New York State. Maybe you have the same sort of...
We went through 3 years of rethinking our incentive programs using similar logic of how do we right size and make sure that we do these things. We incentivize the right behaviors in a smart, targeted way.
And technology, too. Yeah. It's a growth industry, so it's, we're not incentivizing retail or something like that. That could be here anyway. We're incentivizing technology, high-tech jobs that create for future jobs.
Right. Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here, and please stay and enjoy the day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy.